How does a country walk a diplomatic tightrope between the two most powerful nations on Earth? That's the challenge facing India in the increasingly contested Indo-Pacific. As tensions between the US and China keep rising, India finds itself in a precarious position. It's rapidly building its navy and its economy, but here's the critical question. Will this balancing act help India become a true global power, or will it get crushed in the process? To understand what's at stake, we have to look at the new great game playing out across the world's most important stretch of water. The Indo-Pacific isn't just an ocean, it's the new global center of gravity, the engine of the world economy, and the stage for the great power competition of the 21st century. And right in the middle of it all is a nation of 1.4 billion people whose choices could decide how it all turns out. To really get what India is up against, you first have to understand the arena, the vast expanse of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. A massive portion of global maritime trade flows through these waters. The narrow choke points like the Strait of Malacca are the arteries of the world economy, carrying oil from the Middle East to Asia's factories. If you control these sea lanes, you control the lifeblood of global commerce. For decades, this was all guaranteed by the unrivaled power of the United States Navy. But a new giant has entered the game. China, flexing its incredible economic muscle, has launched one of the most ambitious naval buildups in modern history. Its goal is crystal clear: break out of the first island chain and project its power across the Indo-Pacific, securing its trade routes and asserting its dominance. Beijing's strategy is often called the String of Pearls, a network of ports and military installations in countries from Pakistan to Sri Lanka and Myanmar. Each pearl gives China another strategic foothold in the Indian Ocean, which New Delhi has long seen as its own backyard. This has completely upended the strategic calculus for India. The Indian Ocean isn't just a trade route, it's a vital security buffer. China's growing presence there is seen as a direct challenge to India's core interests. In response, India has been forced to ditch its traditionally defensive posture. It has shifted from being a force focused on coastal defense to seeing itself as a net security provider for the whole region. This is a huge change. India is signaling that it plans to take responsibility for maritime order, policing sea lanes, and securing those critical choke points. To back this up, India is in the middle of a massive naval modernization. As of early 2025, the Indian Navy has about 50 vessels under construction, with a long-term goal of fielding up to 200 ships by 2050. In a symbolic show of force in January 2025, the Navy commissioned 3 major warships, a destroyer, a frigate, and a submarine, all on the same day, signaling its intent to rapidly close the gap with China. This expansion includes advanced destroyers, aircraft carriers capable of operating the latest Rafale fighter jets, and a new generation of stealthy submarines. But warships are only half the story. The other half is partnerships. And that's where the United States comes in. Washington sees India as the essential partner in its strategy for a free and open Indo-Pacific. This shared interest led to the revival of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad, a strategic forum bringing together the US, Japan, Australia, and India. The Quad's comeback is one of the most significant geopolitical developments of the last decade. Through it, these 4 democracies coordinate on everything from maritime security and infrastructure to cybersecurity and critical tech. The signature event is the Malabar Naval Exercise, where the 4 navies practice high-end warfighting skills together, building the kind of teamwork they'd need if a crisis ever broke out. However, India's involvement has a big string attached. New Delhi is adamant that the Quad should not become a formal, NATO-style military alliance. It sees the Quad as a partnership of convenience, an issue-based coalition to push back against China's assertiveness, not a blank check for American military adventures. India is playing a very complex game here. It's using its partnership with the US to get access to advanced military hardware and intelligence. At the same time, it's carefully avoiding being dragged into a direct fight with its powerful neighbor to the north. The question is, how long can India get the benefits of an American partnership without paying the price of American alignment? This naval chessboard is just the first layer of India's balancing act. The real tightrope is diplomatic. If you want to understand India's foreign policy, you have to get one core concept that has guided it for decades: strategic autonomy. Simply put, it's the fierce determination to make decisions based on India's own national interests without being tied down by alliances or told what to do by other powers. It's a legacy of its non-aligned roots, just updated for a world with multiple powers. In an era of escalating rivalry between Washington and Beijing, this principle is being tested like never before. India insists on its right to engage with all sides, a policy some now call multi-alignment. The best illustration of this tightrope walk is India's collection of membership cards. In one hand, it holds a membership to the US-led Quad, a group pretty clearly designed to counter China. In the other, it holds memberships to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, and BRICS, forums dominated by China and Russia. It's not uncommon for India's prime minister to be slated to attend an SCO summit in China, even as military and diplomatic tensions with Beijing persist. This is strategic autonomy in action, showing up in both camps, talking to everyone, and refusing to be locked into a single bloc. This allows India to position itself as a bridge between the global north and the global south, a responsible power that can talk to anyone. Nowhere is this balancing act trickier than with Russia. This isn't just a historical friendship, it's a deep strategic partnership. Russia is still one of India's main suppliers of advanced military gear, from fighter jets to the S-400 air defense system. This reliance creates a huge point of friction with the United States. Washington has laws like CAATSA, designed to punish countries that buy Russian weapons. While India has managed to dodge these pressures so far, the growing Russia-China axis is a strategic nightmare for New Delhi. As Moscow becomes more dependent on Beijing, India faces the risk of its longtime defense partner becoming a junior partner to its main strategic rival. This forces India into an incredibly delicate dance, keeping its crucial defense ties with Moscow while deepening security cooperation with Washington, all while Washington and Moscow see each other as enemies. India's strategy also plays out in its wider neighborhood, especially Southeast Asia. Instead of trying to make smaller nations choose between the US and China, India promotes ASEAN centrality. This means supporting the Association of Southeast Asian Nations as the main driver of the region's future. It's a subtle but smart move. By backing ASEAN, India looks like a partner that respects local institutions, which is a sharp contrast to China's often heavy-handed tactics and America's focus on hard security alliances. Through its Act East policy, India has been strengthening economic and cultural ties with countries like Vietnam and Indonesia, which are also nervous about Chinese dominance. This diplomatic maneuvering is really a hedge. India is betting that by keeping all its options open, it can boost its own influence and avoid getting trapped in a disastrous conflict between the two superpowers. It wants to shape a multipolar Asia where power is more spread out, rather than a bipolar one locked in a new Cold War. But this is a high-risk, high-reward strategy. While it protects India's independence, it also risks annoying its partners. In a crisis, the United States wants to know who's with them and who's against them. China sees India's work with the Quad as a hostile move. By trying to be a friend to everyone, India could end up being truly trusted by no one. And the success of this whole diplomatic balancing act depends on one more thing: economic power. In the 21st century, geopolitical influence isn't just about warships and diplomats. It's built on economic muscle. The Indo-Pacific is both a military theater and an economic battlefield. And here, too, India is caught between the pull of China and the United States. China's main tool of influence is its massive Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. This giant infrastructure project has seen Beijing funding and building ports, railways, and highways across Asia and Africa. While it brings development, the BRI is also a tool of strategic leverage. It can create debt traps, giving Beijing political power over countries, as we've seen in places like Sri Lanka and Pakistan. India has been very suspicious of the BRI, especially because a key part of it, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, runs through territory that India claims. In response, New Delhi has pushed its own connectivity plans. Teaming up with Japan, it launched the Asia-Africa Growth Corridor as a more transparent alternative to the BRI. Its Act East policy is just as much about economics as diplomacy, aiming to connect India's economy with the booming markets of ASEAN. The goal is to show India as a reliable economic partner, an alternative growth engine for a region that's worried about becoming a Chinese economic satellite. The Quad has also recently focused on building resilient supply chains for critical minerals, specifically to reduce the world's dependence on China. However, India is facing a big economic dilemma, best shown by its decision on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP. RCEP is a huge free trade deal that includes China and many of India's key partners in Southeast Asia. After years of negotiations, India dramatically pulled out at the last minute in 2019. Why? The main reason was fear. Fear that opening its markets would unleash a flood of cheap Chinese goods, wiping out Indian manufacturing and farming. This decision highlights a core vulnerability. For all its ambition, India's economy isn't quite ready to go toe-to-toe with the Chinese manufacturing juggernaut. While there are some discussions that India might rethink its position, the fundamental challenge is still there. This all links back to India's military and diplomatic goals. A strong economy is what pays for a 200-ship navy. It's what lets you offer development loans to your neighbors as an alternative to Chinese money. It's the ultimate source of national power. Projections show India as the world's fastest-growing major economy, on track to become the third largest with a GDP of over $7 trillion by 2030. Exports have surged, and foreign investment is flowing in. But this growth isn't a sure thing. A global slowdown could hurt Indian exports, and India has to manage its own internal problems like debt and inflation to keep the engine running. So, the Economic Balancing Act might be the hardest one of all. India has to handle pressure from the US while managing its complicated and often tense trade relationship with China. Recent US tariffs have created friction, leading to speculation that New Delhi might have to move closer to Beijing on economic issues out of sheer necessity. This is the paradox at the heart of India's position. It needs to both compete with and cooperate with China, all while building up its own domestic economic strength to give its grand strategy real teeth. Without a tough, competitive economy, India's dream of becoming a leading power will stay just that, a dream. So let's go back to the central question. After looking at the military, diplomatic, and economic sides of India's strategy, what's the final calculation? Is this tricky balancing act a brilliant path to global power, or a dangerous gamble that could see India crushed between two giants? The argument for success hinges on India's unique role as the ultimate swing state in the Indo-Pacific. By refusing to formally align with either side, India makes itself essential to both. For the United States and its allies, India is the democratic heavyweight they need to prevent Chinese dominance. Its sheer size, growing military, and strategic location make it a critical counterweight. For China and Russia, India's presence in groups like the SCO and BRICS gives them legitimacy and prevents their total international isolation. In this view, strategic autonomy isn't indecisiveness. It's a smart strategy to maximize influence. By becoming a leading power instead of just an allied power, India can help shape a multipolar world that works better for its interests, an order where no single country calls all the shots. But there's a powerful argument for Peril. That tightrope India is walking is getting thinner, and the crosswinds are picking up. The core contradiction in its strategy is getting harder to ignore. How long can India build a quasi-alliance with the US through the Quad, while claiming to be non-aligned? How long can it engage with a Russia that is increasingly in China's debt? The pressure from both Washington and Beijing is immense and growing. The US is becoming more transactional, wanting clear commitments from its partners. Meanwhile, China keeps up its relentless military and infrastructure push, slowly chipping away at India's sphere of influence. And the border between India and China remains a volatile flashpoint, with tens of thousands of troops still deployed. The biggest danger is that India's room to maneuver could just disappear. A major crisis over Taiwan in the South China Sea or on their own border could force India to make the one choice it has spent decades trying to avoid. Picking a side would mean giving up its prized autonomy and becoming a piece in someone else's great game. But refusing to choose could leave it isolated and vulnerable, facing a powerful and angry neighbor all alone. Ultimately, the success of this grand balancing act depends on India's own internal strength, its economic growth, its social stability, and its political will. India stands at a historic crossroads navigating the treacherous waters of the Indo-Pacific. Its strategy is a bold claim to be a rule shaper, not just a rule taker, on the world stage. The path is risky, and the margin for error is razor thin. The future of the Indo-Pacific, and maybe the whole global order, might not be decided in Washington or Beijing alone, but by the tough choices being made right now in New Delhi. The question is no longer if India will play a decisive role, but what the world will look like when it does. If you found this breakdown insightful, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more deep dives into global geopolitics. And let us know what you think in the comments. Can India successfully walk this tightrope to become a true global power? Or is the pressure from the US and China just too much to handle?